Thank you for joining us today. Hello, and welcome to From Lansing with Love. I'm your host, State Representative Leslie Love. Every month we discuss a different topic with interesting guests. I hope you find this program both informative and insightful. In 2003, the legislature passed a law known as driver's responsibility fees to help balance the state budget during the Great Recession. Remember that? These fees were in addition to the normal fines for driving infractions such as speeding, drunken driving, or failing to stop. The extra fees were as high as $2,000. These were huge burdens on our drivers that did nothing to promote public safety. It caused many people to lose their license to drive. It also had a snowball effect because some people still needed to get to work, and that led to more infractions when people would lose the opportunity to drive because they had a suspended license. So it was one on top of another issue. But in March, the governor signed bills into law that eliminates the fees and wipes out all outstanding debt as of October 2018. The Secretary of State is charged with implementing that law, and many people have questions about how that will be accomplished. So we will talk about that today, as well as some other areas the Secretary of State is responsible for. So I'm excited because we have with us today Ms. Linda Lee Tarver, the Director of Community Affairs and Election Integrity Liaison for the Office of the Michigan Secretary of State. She has served the people of Michigan for more than 33 years and has worked under the leadership of 4 Michigan Secretary of States. So please welcome with me, and thank you for being here, Ms. Linda Lee Tarver. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Representative Love.
Wow, 33 years. That's legacy. That is a long time.
It is a long time.
So who were the 4 Secretary of States that you served
I was hired in under Richard Austin, Secretary Austin, a brilliant man, a Mr. Traffic Safety as he was called. And then we had Secretary Miller, Candace Miller, who was our 9/11 Secretary of State. So it was a very difficult time, and we went through some difficult times after that. And then Secretary of State Terry Lynn Land, who was instrumental in doing a lot of the automation for the state. And now Secretary of State Ruth Johnson, who has been on fire for doing some awesome things throughout the state in technology and access and customer focus and customer centric and making sure Michigan citizens have all that they need from our department.
Wow, well, I can't even believe you've been there 33 years.
Absolutely.
I thought you were 33. So look at that. Look at God.
Thank you.
But, you know, I really like Terry Lynn Land and what she did with automation because I could go and renew my driver's license online.
Yes.
And, you know, I didn't have to go in that Secretary of State's office.
Absolutely.
And she did a lot with that. When whatever I needed to know, I could do a lot of my interfacing that I needed to do with the Secretary of State online. So I do think
one of the things that she did that I don't think got a lot of press, but it was so important, especially for older citizens, is that she eliminated the renewal test. People used to have to go in and take a renewal test with their driver's license, and people who are not comfortable with testing were so upset about going in and taking the renewal test. It was a basic knowledge test of new laws that had passed. It had no bearing on whether you could get a renewal, but people didn't know that.
Okay.
And so she eliminated the renewal test.
It's like, why take a test?
Why
You
take a
don't
test?
need.
Exactly. To renew my driver's license.
Well,
so.
speaking of removing things that we don't need
Absolutely.
anymore, this driver's responsibility that we passed that will end October 1.
Yes.
So tell us about how the Secretary of State's role in that and what people will need to do.
So what we've done in 2003, it was assigned to the Secretary of State, then it was Terry Lynn Land, and to implement the driver responsibility fees. I was the project manager, actually, for the department and worked with the Department of Treasury to handle our collections. And so with this new elimination of driver responsibility fee, we are charged with making sure that we transition and implement the law that you make. So the laws that you pass, the executive branch implements those laws. In doing so, we are communicating and working with partners to get the word out of the drivers who have the opportunity to get the fees waived before October 1st. And so we're notifying those drivers and individuals, and we're working with people who would otherwise not know what they need to do. So
Okay.
there are opportunities for communication, and then we're preparing, and you have passed an appropriation to allow us to hire more people in the branches to help with the aftermath of that.
Okay. So people always ask me, is this really happening? What does this mean? Like, what do I have to pay any of the back fees? Do I pay just the original ticket price? So I have, does the Secretary of State, will you say, okay, this is your letter, this is how much you still owe, this is what you need to do? What should I expect if I am a person with a driver's responsibility fee on me now? What do I need to do?
So there are different areas of where people are at with driver responsibility fees. Some people have paid it nearly off, and so they could pay it off, whatever is remaining. They could pay it in full, and in that case, they would be alleviated of any responsibilities for paying it. Their suspensions would be terminated if they are suspended for driver responsibility non-payment, and they could then, if they're otherwise eligible, go get their license today. Or they can make payment arrangements. Some people who are now still being assessed.
Wait, let me pause right there.
Yes.
So if I pay it off today, I can renew?
You can get your license back.
Okay.
If you're paid in full,
Paid in full.
then you can go and get your license back. That's one option,
Okay.
is payment in full.
I don't want to pay it. What is my option?
So then you can make payment arrangements,
Okay.
and those payment arrangements will allow you to pay on it until October 1st, if you'd like. And then once you make the payment arrangements, it's accepted, then you could go in and get your license back if you're otherwise eligible to drive. The third option is a workforce development. So some individuals are eligible to take a 10-hour class, and it would eliminate the driver responsibility fee option with the notice of intent to take this 10-hour class. As soon as Treasury receives that and it's documented, we will remove the suspensions. They'll zero you out to you owe nothing, and then you have 45 days to take the 10-hour class.
Okay.
And then you get if you're otherwise eligible to drive, you can get your license back immediately.
Wow. So is there an option where I can say, I'm not going to pay, I'll just wait till October 1st?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can wait until October 1st, and waiting till October 1st is fine. And on October 1st, which is a Monday, you can go into any Secretary of State branch office and get your license back if you are otherwise eligible to drive. And I've been using that caveat, if you're otherwise eligible. So driver responsibility suspensions and fees will go away, but the underlying tickets or suspensions that you had outside of, let's say you didn't pay a ticket, that suspension will remain, and you just need to pay that ticket.
Okay.
Or if you need to show up in court, that would remain until you showed up in court, if you have a bench warrant or something like that.
So I could have collected $2,000 in driver's responsibility fees. That's separate.
Or
But the
$10,000.
actual, or $10,000?
Yes, multiple,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, and then the original ticket was a speeding ticket, and I owe like $200 for that. So I can just have to pay my $200 ticket, but not pay the $2,000 driver's responsibility fee.
Correct. But speeding tickets did not automatically qualify you.
okay.
You needed to get 7 more points. Things that are misdemeanors or driving while license suspended, drunk driving, as you indicated in your opening, those things, no proof of insurance was a part of that at one point. And so those things would qualify you for $500 or $1,000 for 2 years. So that's some very hefty fees.
Yeah, it is. And so I guess if someone is driving right now
Yes.
without a license, with a suspended license,
Yes.
they'll still get another ticket. You'll still have a fee, but then October 1, the fee goes away, but the ticket responsibility is still there.
Correct.
Okay.
And so driving while license suspended is a misdemeanor. And so people don't understand that at this point. They think it's a ticket. And some law enforcement officers will stop you and give you a ticket, and you'll have to show up in court. But it is a misdemeanor, and something that the legislature will have to look at if they want to keep it that way.
All right. Wow. So I really wanted to clear that up so people would understand that this is an opportunity to get it back on track. In fact, we have constituents that called my office this week
Okay.
to get their license installed, and so they're doing a temporary plan. But here's the next part.
Okay.
So we've paid all of our, we've forgiven driver's responsibility fees, we've paid our tickets, and we're going to renew our license, but we've got some new license requirements too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so tell us about the new enhanced driver's license.
Well, that is an awesome feature that we're offering right now through Secretary of State Ruth Johnson to comply with the National Real ID law. This was birthed out of 9/11, and for many years we've been trying to get good documentation. I know in Florida several of the hijackers were had Floridian license, and so at that point, that's where the strengthening of the driver's licenses and issuance of that was birthed out of in the 9/11 Commission recommendation. And so every state is required to be compliant with Real ID.
Okay, let's pause there. What's the difference between a real ID and enhanced ID, enhanced driver's license?
So enhanced ID or Real ID, enhanced is a RFID chip that allows you to travel via ground to Canada or Mexico in lieu of a passport.
Oh.
So in lieu of a passport, you can use an enhanced ID. It has a flag on your driver's license or state ID card, and it allows you to travel on ground, or it allows you to cruise as well to Mexico or some of the other ABC islands that we have around us. And so it is a very much a Homeland Security checked documentation. It allows you to do that. It is compliant. It has been compliant, and it costs a little bit more with the RFID chip to do that. The Real ID has a star on it. It says that you have documented that you are have legal presence in the United States. And so legal presence is that you've shown that you are a U.S. born citizen or a citizen of the United States, that you've shown that you are here legally present in the United States, whether temporary. And that's what the star is for. And so having the star, having the flag on your license or ID is necessary for 2020. So in October 1st, 2020, you will not be able to fly unless you have a Real ID compliant driver's license or a Real ID compliant state ID, state issued ID.
And the Secretary of State's office is where you can get that, right?
Absolutely. It's the only place you can get that. So those are state issued IDs that the states are required to do, and Michigan is a compliant state, and we're working to get everyone there. And so that's what we're hoping to do, which is why we're asking for proof of legal presence in the United States.
And that's why I'm glad whenever I call you, Linda, you come out to the district and you do presentations, and you've been out to my district several times to talk about the Real ID, the enhanced ID, because I don't know that the public really knows that we're changing to this new system by 2020.
Yes.
And if you want to fly, you want to leave outside of the country, you need to have that. And I think that's just going to be the form of ID that's the preferred accepted.
Absolutely. Or enter federal buildings after October 1st. So I don't know how many people visit nuclear facilities, but you definitely visit federal buildings for, federal office buildings.
Or the federal court.
Or the federal courts.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need a Real ID.
So speaking of ID, what age can you get an ID? Is this only for 18-year-olds and older?
No, the law does not have an age minimum. So if you have a Social Security card, a 6-week-old baby, you can hold that baby up and put them in front of the Secretary of State camera and take a picture with a birth certificate, a Social Security card, and the parent's identification. You can have your child, an infant, a child, a toddler, a teen, a tween, or whatever you want to get a state ID. So we are encouraging young people to have state IDs earlier. It's a life document.
Okay, we're going to come right back after the break because the Secretary of State has a special program the way you can ID your baby, to have the ID and the fingerprinting and everything in case your child is abducted, so that they're in the database. So we'll talk a little more about that and so many other things that I'm trying to cover that the Secretary of State does for you. There's a reason why there's a wait in the line, because they do so much. So folks, you keep on watching and we'll be right back after this.
I'm Ruth Johnson, Michigan Secretary of State.
I'm Colonel Christy Kibiechu of the Michigan State Police.
We're here today with emergency responders to remind you to give them a lane.
It's not only the law,
it saves lives.
Both yours
and ours.
Help us to get home safely.
So move over.
Give them a lane.
And help save lives.
Welcome back to From Lansing with Love. We are here with my special guest, Linda Lee Tarver, the Director of Community Affairs and Election Integrity Liaison for the Michigan Secretary of State. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
When we took the break, we were talking about the special, how young you can be when you can get a driver's license or a state ID. Because not a driver's license, you have to be like 18.
A state ID.
But a state ID card. And I misspoke. I think I said something about fingerprinting. That's not the case. What do you do for young people who want to get a state ID and the age limit again?
So we're encouraging across the state through a few initiatives. We work with DHHS on Free ID for Me. So parents who are disabled, or if they have a disabled child, or parents who are on cash assistance, FIP, can get a free state ID. It's $10, but the fee is waived if they meet certain disability, SSI, SSDI, SDA, or FIP. I know it's a lot of acronyms, but if they're on disability or cash assistance through DHHS, they and all of their children qualify for a free ID. And so we've been partnering with DHHS and encouraging families to start young to get the life documents for their children. It's important to start getting IDs now. It allows them to get jobs, be more employable, open up savings accounts and different things like that, like super child savings accounts. Right. It also helps if we have an Amber Alert, if one of our precious babies are abducted. The state ID is readily available for law enforcement to push out there, so the ID of the child is out there versus trying to deal with a family in crisis and in turmoil over the abduction and trying to find a little photo of their child. The state ID is definitely right there and usable, and those precious seconds are important.
Right. You know, having an ID is fundamental to access to everything.
Absolutely.
Whether you need a driver's license to drive, or a state ID to open a bank account, or some form of identification to go and vote.
Yes.
And this is a big election year.
Yes.
So what type of identification would a person need when they show up to the poll? I know in some cases you don't need any ID. They will allow you to vote if you don't have ID. You have to sign an affidavit that will allow you to vote. So we don't want to have barriers to people who want to go vote but forgot your ID card, or
Correct.
you don't have an ID card. So what is the Secretary of State's role in elections, and what would be an acceptable form of ID should someone show up at the poll with their ID card? If they don't have a driver's license, but they have...
There's several documents that are listed on our website, michigan.gov/SOS, under the Elections tab, that talks about the acceptable form of ID for voting, which includes state-issued IDs, like driver license, state ID, or federal-issued ID, a military ID, and the like. If you did not bring it to the polls, you certainly can sign the affidavit and proceed to vote. Those are, for Michigan, it's one of the few states that will make sure that you have access to voting. We also have opportunities for you to register to vote at the Secretary of State's office. It's called under the motor voter law. A lot of people don't know we're #1 in the nation for registering people to vote. Over 94% of our eligible voters are registered to vote. Those 6% might be people who decide, objectors, that they don't want to vote. But 94% of those who are eligible to vote are registered to vote. And a lot of the people who get them when they get their first ID, they can register to vote.
That's what I always say. When you turn 18, if you get your driver's license for the first time, or
your state
it's
ID.
just you register for is it selective
Services.
services?
Correct.
It's a rite of passage.
It is.
And then you also say, and I like to get my voter registration done too. Just do it all at the same time.
We are required. The whole system stops at the Secretary of State branch office. What people may not know is that the system stops and a big wording, a script is asked, would you like to register to vote? It will not allow the clerk to move forward unless they hear a yes or no. And that was under Richard Austin, the motor voter law, which is from the 70s, and which is why we have the highest voter registration rate in the nation. One of the things as it relates to voting that I really wanted to share is that ex-offenders can vote in Michigan. In some of the southern states, ex-offenders cannot vote. Once you have a felony on your record, you cannot vote in some of the southern states. But in Michigan, you can vote. You can vote on tether. You can vote on parole. You can certainly vote in Michigan, and that's one of the things that I've been going around the state is ensuring that people in Michigan, especially who come from the southern states, may not have voted since they've been out of incarceration in their southern states. But when they come to Michigan, they certainly can vote. So Michigan's laws concerning voting it's very important to know who can vote and where you can vote. The Michigan.gov vote, the access to your ballot early, the access to knowing who your clerk is, knowing where you can go and vote. All of that is important. The Secretary of State is the chief elections officer. She provides training and materials and education and public education and knowing your voter rights. All of that material is out there. She's been doing a phenomenal job and to branch out and to allow people to see their ballot, see the ballot initiatives and the proposals ahead of time.
I think people don't realize just how engaged the Secretary of State is in a lot of different areas. Sometimes it's kind of just looked at as the DMV place.
Yes.
I need my driver's license tag, registration and tags, and that's it. But it is one of the largest employers in the state of Michigan.
Yes.
Can you talk about just the girth of the Secretary of State and the different divisions that it touches?
So unlike some of the other state agencies, so the taxpayer-funded agencies and state agencies, the law requires at least one branch offices in all of our counties. So we have to have a presence in each of the counties. And so we do hire from the community within the county and within our branch offices, multiple branch offices in Detroit and other locations that are larger. But we are required by law to have a presence there. So we hire local.
A lot of different departments or divisions within the Secretary of State, right? What are some of those?
So we have 7 major functions. We have a human resources that handles the recruitment of our employment. We do driver's license and driver licensing and vehicle registration, and we have divisions within the department that deal with the complexities of vehicle titles. We have a fraud area. We have elections. We have our community affairs and government affairs and external affairs and reaching out to the community to articulate all of the services that we're working with as well. Okay. We do regulations for the dealerships and mechanics and others. So
wow, it is huge.
It's huge.
It's a lot that's going on there. But I know there's someone watching now that says, that's all nice, but what are you going to do about those darn long lines? So what are some of the things the Secretary of State is doing to reduce the wait time in the branch offices? So
right now we have what we call My Timeline. Secretary of State Ruth Johnson hit it out of the park with this one, with My Timeline. It allows you, for some of our busiest branch offices, to reserve your spot in line. It'll send you a text or an email and let you know when you're next up in line. And you reserve your spot up to 2 weeks or a month in advance if you know that you have to go in, and that's what you can do.
So you can make an appointment.
Absolutely. For the first time at the Secretary of State office. And some people don't. And some people are not comfortable with the technology yet, but a lot of people are taking advantage of that.
And then some simple things. I just had a birthday this month.
Yes, mine's
But I
Monday.
renewed everything online. But when I do go into the Secretary of State, there's a new machine in the branch that I went
Absolutely.
into. So things like my tags, I could get them out of the machine.
It started under Secretary of State Terry Lynn Land, and it was expanded and improvised under Secretary Johnson to allow for the self-serve kiosk. And she is adding more to that kiosk that allows you, that will come out next year, beyond her tenure. But that will be a blessing to the people of Michigan to allow them more opportunities to do more self-service at that kiosk. But I love it. That's what I use to get my tabs. I can go in anytime. You can go in. Some of them are 24/7. So 3 o'clock in the morning, you want to get your tabs. You just scan, pay, and go. And you get your tabs right there and put them on the back of your vehicle and move it on. And so those are some of the phenomenal things. And also advocating for things that you don't need to come in for. And so making sure that you keep good records and making sure that that you're fully prepared, and some of the fraud and consumer protection items she's been working on as well.
That is great. So one last thing, because we're running out of time.
Okay.
You know, on your driver's license, there's that little heart.
Yes.
Little special thing to me, and every year I check the box that says I volunteer to be an organ donor.
Yes.
Tell us about the organ donor program and how successful that's been with the Secretary of State, and why people should probably, if you like, to consider being an organ donor.
Absolutely. I did not have a heart on my license until I met Ruth Johnson, Secretary of State Ruth Johnson. She's a phenomenal lady, but she had great vision when it came to that. When she got here, 21% was on the organ donor registry. It has hit 5 million people. We're up to 65%. She's partnered with MOTEP, with the Minority Organ Tissue and Transplant Education Program in Detroit area. People who look like me are the last to sign up for organ donor, but are the first to need one in particular for those. And so I love my heart, because it represents really a heart of saving lives, and it has
really
been
does.
phenomenal. You can
Yes.
sign up online at the expressos.com. You can sign up at the Secretary of State branch office, and you can also sign up through many of the outreach programs that we're having.
I think that's so important, the organ donation, because like you said, you can't take it with you.
No.
And whether it's your eyes or your kidneys or whatever organ that
Or
you
tissue.
have. Or tissue.
Yes.
Right. And how valuable that is. People understand of donating blood.
Yes.
But that life-saving organ that you can give, that, life goes on even after
And you can
should
be in
perish.
any form of health, cancer, HIV, old, very young, it doesn't matter, because there is, you can sign up. So that should not be an inhibitor. And I think one of the things that the Secretary has done is shared a lot. Our oldest person on the registry is 103, and our youngest is 3.
Wow.
So,
Well, what I learned today, and I hope that our viewers did as well, is that the Secretary of State is a dynamic
Yes.
department. Everything from driver's responsibility to elections to fishing licenses.
yes, traffic safety.
Traffic safety, organ donation,
Yes.
monitoring or assisting in elections processes. It is a huge entity. It's not just license tags and registration
Yes.
people. So I thank you, Linda Lee
Thank you.
Tarver, for joining us today, and I hope everybody learned a lot here
Thank you.
especially about driver's responsibility, that will end on October 1st of this year. So that's about all the time we have for today. And I'd like to once again thank my
Thank
special
you.
guest,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Linda Lee Tarver, the Director of Community Affairs and Elections Integrity Liaison for the Secretary of State. And thanks to all of you for watching. If you have an idea for a show, please contact my office. That contact information will be on the screen. So until next time, be good to yourself and each other. And with that, we're all clear and out of here.